Things have really reached a boiling point between the US, Israel, and Iran. With Iran's leadership directly in the crosshairs, the big question isn't just if the regime can be taken out, it's what on earth comes next.
So yeah, how does this actually end? Because look, when you take the head off a system like Iran's, you don't just magically get peace. What you get is a whole lot of uncertainty. And it's right there, in that moment of uncertainty, where conflicts either fall apart or spiral completely out of control.
With Ayatollah Khamenei gone, a massive power vacuum has just ripped open in Tehran. Now sure, Iran's constitution technically has a plan for this, a little temporary leadership council. But the reality on the ground, especially under bombardment, is way simpler. Real power doesn't belong to politicians or clerics, it belongs to whoever has the guns.
And in Iran, that means the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. Now you gotta understand, the IRGC isn't just an army. They control huge chunks of Iran's economy, its oil, its internal security, everything. That makes them, without a doubt, the real center of power in this crisis.
So, to really get a handle on where this is all going, here's what we're going to do. We'll break down that power vacuum in Iran, walk through 3 possible futures for the regime, talk about the staggering price of a long war, see how Russia and China are playing the sidelines, and finally, we'll try to figure out the most plausible outcome.
All right, first up, let's look inside Iran. This power struggle has really opened up 3 very different paths forward for the regime, and trust me, each one sends massive shockwaves around the globe.
The first path, and the one you hear about most, is total collapse.
So on one hand, you've got Washington's dream scenario, right? The airstrikes weaken the regime, massive protests break out, the security forces start to crack, and the whole system just kind of crumbles without a huge invasion. But the messy reality, like we saw in Libya, is so much more dangerous. Taking out a leader with no replacement can lead to straight-up warlordism. And Iran, it's a huge, diverse, and very heavily armed country. A power vacuum there could easily explode into a brutal civil war. That's not victory, that's just chaos.
Okay, the second path, which is a lot less chaotic, is something analysts are calling a managed surrender. The idea here is instead of a total collapse, some moderate figure from inside the system steps up. They cut a deal. They dismantle Iran's nuclear and missile programs, and in return, the bombing stops and sanctions are lifted. This would be a much cleaner way out. It keeps the country from falling apart, calms down the energy markets, and cools things off in the region. But here's the catch. You'd have to get IRGC hardliners, whose power and money depend on the current system, to actually agree to it. And you'd need Washington to agree to stop short of total regime change. It's a very fragile compromise.
And that leads us to path number 3, and honestly, this might be the most dangerous one of all, decentralized resistance. In this scenario, the regime doesn't fold, it just adapts. The IRGC has a deep bench of commanders, and they're experts at operating under pressure. So they just go underground, they scale back, they use their drone networks, their regional proxies, and suddenly, what was supposed to be a quick decapitation strike turns into a long, grinding, ugly war of attrition, fought with drones, missiles, and constant attacks on global shipping.
And it's that scenario, that decentralized resistance, where the price tag for this war starts to get unbelievably high, not just for the region, but for literally everyone.
You can trace pretty much all of the global impact back to one single geographic choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. This is where a regional war smashes right into the global economy.
Think about it. About a fifth of all the world's oil has to squeeze through this tiny strait. And you don't even need Iran to officially blockade it to cause chaos. Just the fear of a missile attack is enough for insurance companies and shippers to back off, and that sends shockwaves through the entire global supply chain.
And we're already seeing the ripple effects. You can see right here how prices for Brent crude oil and European natural gas shot up right after the first strikes. If oil goes past $100 a barrel and just stays there, that economic pain becomes a huge political problem.
Why? Because that economic pain shows up at the gas pump. When gas prices in the U.S. start creeping towards $4 a gallon or even higher, public support for a long, drawn-out war can vanish fast. The political cost back home just grows and grows.
But it's not just about money. There's another huge cost. These high-tech air campaigns burn through incredibly sophisticated weapons at a frightening pace. I'm talking about things like Tomahawk cruise missiles, advanced air defense interceptors. You don't have an infinite supply of these. It takes a lot of time and industrial power to build more, and that strain has global consequences because those weapons have to be pulled from somewhere else.
And you can bet
that as the US is burning through its best gear and focusing all its attention on the Middle East, other world powers are watching very, very closely.
For Moscow, a long war is basically a strategic gift. Higher oil prices fill up their budget, and a distracted West means less attention and fewer weapons for Ukraine. Russia doesn't even need Iran to win, they just need the US to stay bogged down. For Beijing, on the other hand, this whole thing is like a live-fire laboratory. They are studying everything: how US stealth jets perform, how fast missile supplies run out, how American politics bend under pressure. A long war here could create an opportunity for them in Asia, maybe even change their thinking on Taiwan.
So, when you add all of this up, the internal chaos, the global costs, the other powers circling, what is the most plausible way this actually ends?
Well, it's probably not going to be total collapse, and it's probably not a forever war. The most likely outcome is something experts are calling a pressured restructuring. Basically, it's a managed transition where the Iranian regime survives, but it comes out the other side much weaker and boxed in by both military force and some serious diplomacy.
So what would that actually look like? Well, the path would be something like this. First, the strikes keep hammering Iran's military infrastructure. At the same time, quiet, back-channel talks start up, probably through a country like Oman. Eventually, they hammer out a deal where Iran agrees to scrap its nuclear program and limit its missiles. In return, the bombing stops, and sanctions start to get lifted piece by piece.
But here's the thing. Even with that cleanest outcome, the world is left dealing with a totally new reality. This conflict puts the idea of regime decapitation, just taking out a country's leadership with force, right back on the table. And that could scare other authoritarian countries into speeding up their own weapons programs. But more than anything, it proves one fundamental truth. Modern wars are never just local. Iran connects to Ukraine, which connects to energy prices, which connects to inflation, which connects to elections all over the world.
It's a massive stress test for the entire global system. And that leaves us all with one last big question to think about. In a world this connected, can any war, anywhere, ever truly stay local anymore?